Today we're going to be learning Rosh Hashanah Daf Daled. Today's daf is sponsored by Sammy Graf in memory of her father, Rabbi Avner Graf. It is fitting that we are starting to learn Masechet Rosh Hashanah at the time of your Yurtzeit. The high holiday tefillot were the highlight of your year as a chazan. After weeks of preparation, your incredibly beautiful tefillot inspired all who had the privilege to hear them. We miss you always. And by Rachel Alexandra Levy in honor of the birthday of Miriam Sophie Levy. Happy 8th birthday to my daughter. You inspire me to learn the daf every day. Okay, we're going to get started with a quick review of the end of yesterday's daf. There was something a little bit confusing that I wanted to clarify, but as I was redoing the summary of the daf, I realized something wasn't exactly making perfect sense, and now I've figured it out. So if we look at the psukim from Ezra, okay, let's just go through a very quick review of what we've seen. We started with Rosh Hashanah, right? The first of Nisan is Rosh Hashanah for the Melachim, for the kings. Then we had to prove, how do we know that? Rabbi Yochanan tried to bring his proof. Then Rabbi Elazar came in and fixed it, right? He kind of had a better proof. Then we went to Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said this is only for Jewish kings, not for Gentile kings. Then we proved that. Then Rav Yosef came and said, but wait, okay? And here's on the sheet, okay? Rav Yosef says to Rav Chisda, it says on the 24th day for the Chodesh HaShishi in Chagai, in Shnat Shtayim L'Daryavish, in the 6th month, second year. Then it says on the 7th, on the 21st of the month, right? Okay, which then says the 7th month. It should have said the 3rd year if really the turnover was in Tishrei. Okay, so that's his question on Rav Chisda. How can you differentiate? It seems like they come from Nisan. To which Rabbi Abahu said, but wait, he said, I don't have a problem because Daryavish was a good king, and therefore he goes like the Jewish kings. Okay, and therefore you can't really knock out Rav Chisda. Rav Yosef has two things. First of all, he says, he didn't say Daryavish, he said Koresh. We resolved that issue by saying Koresh and Daryavish are the same person. But then, and here's the part that's a little bit tricky that I wanted to clarify. Then Rav Yosef brings this contradiction from two verses in Ezra, which contradicts the two verses in Chagai, which he uses as a question on Rabbi Abahu. The issue is, right, because again, those psukim we're going to show from Tishrei, and here I charted them out to make it very clear. It says, V'shitzia beita dana ad yom tlata liyerech Adar. That means the house was fully completed on the 3rd month of Adar, which was Shnat Shit L'Malchut Daryavish. It was the 6th year. So 6th year, Chodesh Adar. I'm looking at the chart now. Then it said, Botozman Shana Ba'ah, right? The next time that year in Adar, Ezra goes to Bavel v'galuto imo. And then it says, and he gets to Yerushalayim b'Chodesh Chamishi, Hishnat Shvi Lamelech. And then he gets there in the 5th month. So if Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah, okay, as Rabbi Abahu said, he was good king, so therefore he always counts like the Jewish kings in Nisan. So if you go from Adar to Adar, you're going to pass through Nisan. That's like passing go on Monopoly, right? How many times are you going to pass Nisan? Twice. You're going to be 2 years later because you're going to have to pass Nisan to get to the 2nd Adar. And then you're going to have to pass Nisan again to get to Av. So you would be in the 8th year, but it actually says in the 7th year. So there it seems to go by Tishrei, right? If you go by Tishrei, you're going to have Adar. You're going to pass Tishrei once on the way to the next Adar. And then on the way to Av, you're not going to have to pass Tishrei. You're going to be in the 7th year. So that works, right? So now the issue that was a little bit tricky here, when I was summarizing the daf at the end of yesterday, I realized something doesn't make sense, which is that Rabbi Yosef raises his difficulty on Rabbi Abahu, but it's a difficulty to him as well. In other words, how to resolve these contradictory psukim is a problem according to everyone, because Rabbi Yosef was trying to say to Rabbi Chisda, even non-Jewish kings go by Nisan. But even if you say that, you still have to resolve this problem of Tishrei. So he raises it. And in fact, we ended with this umikoma kom kashya, right? In any case, it's difficult. In other words, what happened? The structure of the Gemara was Rabbi Abahu asked a question, and then, Rabbi Abahu tried to resolve Rabbi Yosef's question by saying Koresh is Daryavish. And then the Gemara said, yeah, we got that, but mikoma kom kashya, which sounds like we still have one difficulty left of Rabbi Yosef's. But the Ritva says mikoma kom kashya means not just that we have one difficulty of Rabbi Yosef still, it's that, right, on Rabbi Abahu, but also mikoma kom kashya in any case. What does mikoma kom in any case? Meaning in any case, meaning also according to Rabbi Yosef, this is a difficulty we have to resolve. It's true he brought it as difficulty in Rabbi Abahu, but he has to resolve it as well because again, one place says Nisan, one place says Tishrei, we're stuck. So to that answers Rabbi Yitzchak. So again, he's either answering Rabbi Yosef's question on Rabbi Abahu, or he's also as well answering just the problem with these two verses that are contradicting each other. So we now set up that, which is we're going to have to deal with for the next half a daf, which is Iftar Yavish. Why do we count two different ways? He turned bad in the middle of his life or at some point in his life. So before he was bad, when he was good to the Jews, then he goes like Malchei Yisrael. After that, which we already said yesterday, that caused a little confusion. Counting his years seems right, especially we have to know exactly what point do we start changing. But after he turned into a Rasha, basically a bad person, then he goes like Malchei Umot Ha'olam. So Matkif la Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana is now going to ask, and here I'll leave the sheet up in the share screen because I put the English translation because these are, even when they're Hebrew, they're difficult, but these are psukim that are in Aramaic. They're all the more difficult to understand. So I put them in English on the sheet. So Matkif la Rav Kahana, umichmitz. So basically the structure of the next section of the Gemara is going to be, was he really a bad king? To which the Gemara is going to bring 4 answers to show he was a bad king at some point. And each time they're going to ask questions on the answers. Some of them they'll resolve, some of them they won't. He says, how do you know he was a bad king? Look, I'm going to show you something good he did. Okay, which is, I'll read it in the English here, and that which they need, both young bullocks and rams and lambs for the burnt offerings of the God of heaven. Continuing in the pasuk, chintin, which is chitim, wheat, melach, salt, chamar, wine, umeshach, oil, kimamar kahana de Yerushalayim. He gave them whatever the Kohanim said, okay? They needed, lahavi mityav lahom yom b'yom dilo shalu. Without fail, day by day, he gave us to them. Sounds like he was a great king. Every day provided them with whatever they needed. So why do you say he was bad? So like I said, we're going to have 4 answers. So the first answer is, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Rebbe mitunach. We're going to learn it exactly from what you just quoted, because it says there, okay, we were in Ezra, Perek Vav, Pasuk Tet. Now we're going to move to the next Pasuk, Pasuk Yud. It says there, De lahaven mehakriv nichochen la'alishmaya, umatzin l'chayim alko benoi. Why did he do this, right? You missed the point. What was the reason he gave them everything they wanted? Not because he was a great king, but because that they may sacrifice offerings of sweet savor to the God of heaven and pray for the life of the king and his sons. And it was all for ulterior motives. He was just looking to basically, right, get long life. He wanted the Jews to pray for him. Ulterior motives, that, right? Now, it's a little bit tricky here. Doesn't necessarily show he was bad, but it knocks out Rav Kahana's proof that he was good because look, all his life he was giving them food. He was doing it for ulterior motives, for his own sake. To which the Gemara asks a very valuable question, which is, Uman David Hachi Lav Mal Yutehi? Is that not a good thing? Right? Sometimes we do good things, maybe because we're motivated for self-interest. I would say more than ulterior motives, it was self-interest. We do things out of self-interest, but you know what? They're not always considered bad things. And in fact, they're considered good. Bahatanya, let's look at this braita. Haomer, Selazo litzdaka, b'shvil sheyichyu banai, u'b'shvil she'ezkeh b'alechei ha'olam haba, harei ze tzadik gamor. If someone says, I'm giving this amount of money to tzedakah in order that my sons live or that I will get olam haba, that's not a bad thing, right? Not only that, not only is it not bad, it says, harei ze tzadik gamor. You're a complete tzaddik. Wow, right? Now, this is a little bit like that whole thing about you worship God, I'm not l'kabel pras, right? And it's not necessarily looked at as so good, but on the other hand, there's always, the Torah always uses motivation to get people to do mitzvot. So that's really not a bad thing. So, and in fact, it's even a good thing because it's getting you to do something very important. So what does the Gemara answer? Lo kasha kam b'Yisrael, kam b'ovdei kochavim. And that's the first question by saying, no, the first answer, it really is bad that he did it, even though if we give tzedakah so that we get olam haba or our sons live a long life, that's okay. When it comes to Yisrael, that's fine. When it comes to Gentiles, it's not okay. Now, why is that? So the commentaries talk about the fact that if, right, Rosh even says it, Kam Yisrael shelibo l'shamayim, because the Jews have belief in God, I would say, im miri'im lo b'chayav, right? Let's say you say, I'm going to do this so I have a good life, and then you don't have a good life. So what's going to happen? Are you going to reject God? Likely not. You'll say, okay, I understand God didn't give it to me. I asked him, right? I tried to do something so I would get it, but I understand. Eino kore lo tagal. He doesn't start to say, oh God, who are you? And why'd you do that? Blah, blah, blah. But, right, he assumes, he knows that there's an idea of punishment that goes with sin. And he assumes the reason is because I must have sinned, and because of that, I didn't get it. But in Ovei Kochavim, if he doesn't get what he wants, he's going to say, oh, look, your God doesn't do anything, right? Your God isn't a real God. He's not, right? And he'll just start disgracing God. That's why there's this distinction. Okay, so again, first answer is don't think he was so great because he gave the Jews everything they needed for their sacrifices. No, it's really because he had self-interest in mind. It was all because of what he wanted for himself. And that's not appropriate to do when you're a Gentile, because then, again, if he doesn't get it, he's going to blame God. Okay, next. Ibait Ema, second answer. Minalan de Ichnit. So again, that one didn't really answer the question, how do we know he turned bad? Because it doesn't really mean he's bad. It just doesn't show that he was good. So now we're going to say, how do we know Shechnitz? Dichtiv nidbachim di even glal. Rows of, okay, so I'll read the part that they translate before the pasuk. Let the house be built with 3 rows of great stones, tlata, okay, the 3. V'nidbach di achadet, and a row of new timber, right, wood. Okay, so 3 rows of stone and 1 row of wood. V'nafkata min beit malka tityav, and it should all be paid out from the king's house. So here we have, he gave them money to build, right, 3 rows of stone and 1 row of wood. Why is this a bad thing? I don't know why my thing just jumped. Sorry, stop my share screen for a minute. Why is this a bad thing? Because we say, Lama lela David hachi savar imar dube Yehudai ikle benura. He figures if the Jews rebel against him, right? He let them build the Beit HaMikdash, but he says, I'm going to give them wood to build it with, so that if they go bad, they rebel against me, I'll just burn the temple, right? It's wood, it'll burn easily. And there you see he was bad. So now they say, wait a minute. Atu Shlomo lo avid hachi. What, did Shlomo not do this? V'aktiv shlosha turei gazit v'tor krutot achazim. He also did 3 rows of stone and 1 row of cedar. So I don't understand. That was Shlomo HaMelech. He obviously wasn't trying to get the Beit HaMikdash destroyed. Shlomo Avid, and we're now going to say 3 differences of what Shlomo did. Shlomo Avid milamala, v'iu Avid milamata. Shlomo built the wood, the row of wood was at the top. Therefore, if they burnt it, only the top would burn, the bottom wouldn't burn. But he built it at the bottom, and as he had them build in the wood at the bottom of the temple so that he could burn from the bottom. Shlomo shake bebinyana, iu lo shake bebinyana. Shlomo rooted it inside the like maybe in between the stones. It's not 100% clear to me what exactly this means, but he had it built in a way that it wouldn't really be able to be destroyed. Couldn't light it on fire. But when Daryavish gave it to them, no, he didn't do that. Shlomo sagi besida, he plastered it so that, again, if you put the plaster over it, it won't be able to be flammable. But they didn't do that in the second temple, and therefore there are these 3 differences that show, okay, he was bad because he gave them wood to build with, right? Again, it's funny, both these things are shown. He gave them things, but the giving of things, which looks like a good thing, isn't necessarily a good thing. Right? You can give someone something that ultimately might be bad for them. So the first one wasn't that it ultimately would be bad for them. It was just he was doing it for his own self-interest, right? It's not like a real giving. Here he was giving and actually trying to destroy them by doing it. Rabbi Yosef itema Rabbi Yitzchak, third one, minalan deichnitz mehacha, from this pasuk. Remember, he goes to the king, and then the king says, this is our Chachshasta, which we said is also Daryavish, and he's sitting there, and his shegal, which we said was his queen, was sitting next to him. My shegal, Amar Rabba Bar Lima Mishmei Derav Kal Bata. It was a dog. His queen was a dog. He engaged in bestiality with the dog. Okay, bad enough to engage in bestiality, and with a dog, even worse, because a dog is considered of the worst of the animals. We've seen this before in the Gemara. So therefore, that's why we see he was bad from that verse. So Elameata, but wait, Ha dichtiv al mara shmaya hitromamta, ulemayne dibete haitu katamach, va'anat ravinach shagaltech ulachanatech cham rashatim bahon. Okay, this pasuk says, Okay, it's a verse in Daniel. What we're basically doing here is this has nothing to do with our case. It just has the word shegal in it. If we want to say shegal is not a queen, but a dog, it says here that you went up again with God, against God, you maina dibete, you have the kelim of God in front of you. Va'ant v'Rabbanutech, and you and your important people, shegaltech, your queen supposedly, ulachanatech, and your concubines, chamra shatin bahom. Okay, you're all sitting drinking wine. Now, what's going to be the obvious question? If you say, ish shegal kalbatahi, kalbata bat mishia chamrahi, right? Almost like a joke, right? Can dogs drink wine? Of course, it's not a dog. First of all, there's a better way to prove it in that verse. I mean, you have the wife and then the concubine, right? It would seem that was wife and not dog. So the Gemara says, oh yeah, in fact, dogs can drink wine. You might want to try this if you have a dog at home. Halo kashia demalfala ushakin. You can train a dog to drink wine. Okay, dogs can be trained. So elameata, but wait, there's another verse that says, "Bino malachim biyikarutecha nitzva shegali minecha beketem ofir." I'll bring back the translation here. Okay, so now we see again. Sorry, let me go back down. Okay, so king's daughters are among your favorites. Upon your right hand stands a consort in gold of Ophir. Okay, so again, this shegal is this consort with the gold of Ophir. So here you have the benot malachim, you have the daughters of kings. This is a pasuk from Tehillim. And then you have the shegal, which is opposite the daughters of kings and the wife of the king, right? It seems perfect, right? She's on the yamin. The benot malachim are among your favorites. On your right hand, you have your queen. Sounds like that. V'i shegal kalbatehi, right? And again, if you're going to say shegal is a dog, my kamavasalu navi Yisrael. What exactly is a Navi telling the Jewish people? It's not exactly a Navi here because it's Tehillim, but the point is, what kind of blessing is this if you're talking about you're going to have a dog on your right? It doesn't really sound right. So they say, you can really read this pasuk in a different way, and I have to say it's a little hard to read the pshat of the pasuk in this manner. Hachikama, bischar shechaviva Torah lYisrael keshega leobdei kochavim, zechitem leketem Ophir. Let's start from the end. You're going to get the gold of Ophir if what? Because the Torah is chaviva to you, in other words, the benot malachim b'yikirutecha is saying the Torah is very special to you. When you make the Torah special to you, it's nitzvah shegali minecha. It's like the dog to the Gentiles. Okay, first of all, it'd be strange for a verse to be kind of saying the way the dog is to Gentiles, right? It's an analogy. The way the dog is to Gentiles, such you make the Torah. And if you do that, you will get ketem Ophir. Okay, again, to say that that's a simple reading of that verse is quite a difficult reading, but that's what they suggest. So again, let's just go here. It's easier to look here. We can go back to our 3 reasons. Okay, so again, we were trying to figure out, is it really good or not, right? And the first one said, he was really doing it for self-interest. Don't think that pasuk really shows he was a good king. The second one, he gave us wood in order to be able to build the temple so that he could destroy us. The third is he engaged in bestiality with a dog, and the dog was his queen, basically. And now we're going to see the fourth answer. And the fourth is, sorry. No, we're still in we're not yet at the fourth answer. My mistake. We still have a little bit more to go. One option was to read that verse as saying the shegal is a dog, and it's just comparing, right? The same way the dog is to the Gentiles, such the Torah is to the Jews. Or you could say, what did we do to question this? We took the shegal and the pasuk that we wanted with our tashchasta. We said that's a dog. Then we said, but shegal appears in other places, doesn't seem to be like a dog. Dogs don't drink wine. Dogs aren't looked at as a positive thing with the gold of Ophir, right? It's clearly the queen there. So one option is to say, right, understand each of those verses differently. Really, dogs do drink wine. They could, theoretically, that really wasn't referring to the dogs of the Jews. It was Gentiles. Anyway, or Lo'olam shegal malchatahi. Really, shegal in the Torah or Tanakh means queen. The Rabba Barlima Gemara Gemirala. He just had a tradition about that one place where shegal appeared. That in that place it means a dog. Why did he call her a consort, which is normally a word used for the queen? Because the dog was beloved upon him like the queen. And then we don't have to start quoting all these other verses in the Torah to contradict in Tanakh it means queen, or consort. But here it meant dog. Inami, Or alternatively, could have called her Shegal, not because she was beloved like a queen, but shows Shiva bimkom Shegal. He put her in the seat of the queen. And maybe that's why, because remember, it said Yoshevet liado, right? She was sitting right next to him, and that's why. Okay, next, fourth answer. Minalan te'achmitz mehacha. Ad kesef kiklin mea, va'ad chantin kurin mea, va'ad chamar batim mea, va'ad batim meshach mea, umelech dilo katav. This one I forgot to put on the sheet. This is basically saying all the amounts of money that he gave the Jews. Okay, I'll find the exact English translation. It'll read easier. Up to 100 talents of silver and up to 100 measures of wheat and up to 100 baht of wine and up to 100 baht of oil, baht is a measurement, and salt without prescribed limit. Okay, so he basically gave them limits on what he was giving them. He didn't give them anything they wanted. So to which the Gemara said, right, here you see, he went bad, me'ikara below kitzuta, v'hashta bekitzuta. First, the first verse we saw before, he gave them everything they wanted, right? That was in Ezra Perek Vav. This is in Ezra Perek Zayin. He's already giving them with limit, right? Remember there it said whatever they needed. And now it says he gave them exactly this amount. So that looks like he went bad. So the Gemara says, no, Dilma me'ikara lo havakim le bekitzuta. In the beginning, he just didn't know how much to give. So he gave them whatever they needed. Over time, he learned what their needs were, and then he started giving them according to their need. And maybe this pasuk doesn't show anything bad, just shows he knew exactly what they needed, and this was the amount they needed on a daily basis. So, so we reject this last answer, because this last answer really doesn't show necessarily that he was bad. So we reject this answer, but we still have all the other answers from before. Okay, moving on to the next section. Vilirigalim. Okay, now we finally finished Rosh Hashanah for kings. Now we're going to move on. The Recha B'Nisan is also Rosh Hashanah for the Regalim, for the holidays. We didn't really know what that meant. Regalim, Be'echa B'Nisan hu. Be'echa B'Nisan hu, Chamishasar B'Nisan hu. I mean, the Rosh Hashanah for the holidays is the 1st of Nisan. There is no holiday on the 1st of Nisan. There's a holiday on the 15th of Nisan. So Amar of Chisda Regel Shabo Rosh Hashanah L'Regalim. The regel, the holiday that comes out in that month, and as they're saying, it's Nisan. Nisan's the month that has the first holiday. Okay, fine. That didn't really resolve this, though. What's the relevance of having a first holiday? What's the difference? Which holiday is first in the calendar? So they say, right? In fact, we always think of Rosh Hashanah as the first holiday. So what do they answer? Nafkamina linoder lemekamalei b'bal ta'achil. We've learned this in Beitza. It's good review. Okay, the rest of the sugya, for the most part, parts of it we learned already in Beitza, which is if you make a vow and you say, I'm going to bring something to the temple, right? I'll pull up the verses again. Okay, you say, comes up in Dvarim Kaf Gimel, Ki tidor neder la'Hashem Elokecha. If you make a vow to God, lo ta'acher l'shalmo, don't delay in paying up. Ki darosh yidreshenu Hashem Elokecha miyimach v'haya b'cha chet, because God will demand it from you, and you will sin if you don't. Okay, basically, you have to give it in a timely manner. Now, it of course doesn't tell you what does it mean, lo ta'achel. How much can you push this off? So you can listen to Daf Mishalahan. If your Hebrew is good this week, they talk specifically about this issue of procrastinating and pushing things off. So it says now, what's the answer? So Rabbi Shimon, our Mishnah, what's the relevance then of it being the first of the holidays? It goes like Rabbi Shimon. If you remember, we learned this in Beitza. Ditanya. First, we're going to see the rabbi's opinion, then we'll see Rabbi Shimon. Our Mishnah is clearly Rabbi Shimon. Anyone who vows or sanctifies something to the temple or sanctifies the value of someone to the temple. Once 3 holidays pass, you basically have a year, but not a year, a calendar year, a cycle of years. Basically, it makes sense, a cycle of a year. When did you go to the temple? People went in the 3 holidays. So because of that, those are your opportunities. So you get a year. If you didn't do the first, you have the second, you have the third. We give you opportunities. That's the first option. Rabbi Shimon Omer, it is 3. I agree with you, Tanakama. You get like a cycle, but the cycle starts with Nisan, with Pesach. That's what the Mishnah means when it says it's Rosh Hashanah L'Regalim. we go in order. In what it has to, you have to have 3 in order. So now we're going to say, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai was known to say, Rabbi Shimon is Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. So since Rabbi Shimon held Shosha Regalim in order, he also would say, Regalim pa'amim shosha, pa'amim arba'a, pa'amim chamisha. Right? It could come out that you could have 3 regalim, 3 holidays to do it. You could have 4, you could have 5. How so? Ketzad, nadar lifnei Pesach, if you did your neder before Pesach, shlosha. You'd have 3 because you have Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot in order. Lifnei atzeret, if you did it before Shavuot, you get chamisha because, right, you do it between Pesach and Shavuot, you vow. So you get Shavuot, Sukkot, but you haven't started your cycle from the beginning yet. So then you get Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, you get 5. Lifnei achad, before Sukkot, you get arba'ah because you have Sukkot, and then all 3 in order. Tanu Rabbanit. So now we're going to go into a Braita. This gave us 2 opinions. We're now going to see a Braita, and then we're going to learn it from these Psukim and Dvarim. Some of the opinions are going to come from here, which we've seen before. Maybe I'll read them already now before we read the Braita, which is in Dvarim Perek Tet Zayin. It says, Chag HaSukkot taseh lecha shivat yamim v'aspecha migor necha miikrecha. Should make Chag HaSukkot for yourselves, right? When you do the harvest. Then a few psukim later, it says, Shalosh pamim b'shana yira'eh kol sukocha p'nei Hashem Elokecha. 3 times a year, all males should go to the temple. B'chag hamatzot, b'chag Shavuot, b'chag Sukkot. So there's a lot of repetition here. Number 1, Chag Sukkot appears twice, right? It already appears on the top, and then they mention it again, even though we already mentioned Chag Sukkot. Number 2, in Pasuk Tet Zayin itself, it says 3 times a year, and then, which, what are the 3 times a year we go to the temple? We already know from other places in the Torah that it's Chag HaMatzot, Chag Shavuot, or Chag Sukkot. So why do they need to tell you that? So that's also unnecessary. So different opinions are going to darshan these different aspects. So what we're now going to see is a Braita with 5 opinions. Okay, this part I didn't translate, but I'll put it up in the share screen so that you can follow along as we go. Tanu Rabbanan, Chayavei Damim, V'ha'erchin, Haramim, V'ekdeshot. I'll stop here for a minute and start going through all these things. Damim are, if I say I want to give the value of a person with the word damim, there's damim and there's erchin. If I say debay, the value of this person is upon me, as opposed to erech ben adam azalai. In English, it kind of translates as similar. Erech is value, damim is the monetary value. They both really mean monetary value, but the language is important. If I say the value of this person in the word damim, I basically am giving, and this we'll get to when we get to Masechet Erchin in a very long time. Then you give the value of the person, like in the market, whatever it is, where you live, where you are, etc., like a slave in the market, what they would cost to, not a slave, but a worker, like a worker, etc. Erchin, there's a set value in the Torah, and it goes by whatever the Torah says. It doesn't matter where you live, and if times have changed and anything else, it goes by what it says in the Torah. So that's the difference between the two. There's a bunch of other differences. We'll get to them much more in detail in Masechet Erchin. Charamim, cherem. Cherem can either go to Bedek HaBayit, which is to upkeep of the temple, or there's Hermei Kohanim, which go to the Kohanim. Okay, so there's 2 types of cherem. Hekdeshot is sanctifications. I say I'm giving this to the temple, right, this item, then you give the value. Chataot va'ashamot, those are korbanot you're supposed to bring, right? So the first category was optional things. This is, you're obligated, but the question is, when do you have to bring them? We're going to talk about all these, about what's your time frame. When I did a sin, I'm supposed to bring a sin offering, right? How much time do I have to bring it? Olot ushlamim, right? Korbanot olah ushlamim, either voluntary or possibly even obligatory. Stuck, right? Probably not obligatory because those are usually time related, although not always, or maybe always, I don't know. Stakot, okay, if I say I'm going to give charity, this is more relevant to us, right? So when do I have to bring it? Masrot, the tithes, right, that you're supposed to bring. Bechor u'maser, okay, there's tithes for the Kohanim, and then there's tithes for the animals and the before, right? They're supposed to go to the Kohen. Right, till when do I have to bring them? And Pesach, the Gemara is going to ask, what does Pesach have to do with this? Pesach has a very specific day. I don't know what you're talking about. And then Leket Shechan Pe'ah, which are the gifts you give to the poor people when you're in the fields. So what's your time frame about all these things? So here goes our 5 opinions. Kevan she'avru alehem shlosha regalim over bebal ta'achir. That's Tanakama. That matches the Tanakama we already saw, so we're going to move on. Rabbi Shimon omer shlosha regalim kesidran v'chag hamatzot tchila. So Rabbi Shimon says exactly what we already saw. Rabbi Shimon says 3 regalim in order, and chag hamatzot is the first. Rabbi Meir omer kevan she'avar alehem regel echad over bebal ta'achir. Rabbi Meir says, okay, we're going to have to see where he gets this from. 1 regel, that's it. 1 regel. You have no chance, right? Do it now. This is right. This is, I know I work better like this. If I don't do something right away, I usually forget about it, right? If I push it off, it's usually going to get pushed off for a while. Okay. But if you deal with something, if you know you have to deal with it and all you have is a very certain short time frame, then you're not going to forget. If you give people a long time, right, you have a whole year, you have 5 regalim, you could do it next time, don't worry, then you'll keep pushing off, and by the last time you'll forget about it. So he says, do it right away. Again, he doesn't say this is his reason. I'm just trying to give logic for his position. Later, we'll see. He learns it from the verses. But again, people are always affected how they read verses by what they think would be the right thing to do. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov omer, kevan shavua alein shnei regalim over bebal ta'achil. Right? He gives you 2. Okay, he doesn't give you 3. He doesn't give you only 1. He gives you 2, kind of like an in-between position. Last position, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon Omer. This one we saw. If you remember last time, we saw Tanna Kama, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon. We didn't see these 2 middle positions. It doesn't matter where you are on the calendar. It's Chag HaSukkot. So if you did your neder just before Chag HaSukkot, that's all you have. If you did your neder right after Chag Sukkot, you have an entire year. Okay, so it depends on where you are on the calendar. That's a bit of a strange approach, although you'll see where he derives it from the verses. Right? His approach is at least more clear in the verses than some of the others. So my time at the Tanna Kama. Now we're going to go back to the beginning and go by each one. What's the reason for Tanna Kama? Let's go back to that verse, right? Those verses. We already said shalosh pamim b'shana. So why do you need Chag HaMatzot, Chag HaShavuot, Chag HaSukkot? Shema mina lebal ta'achir. It must be telling you some other halacha that when you go to the temple, even though that wasn't the context here, it wasn't talking about nidarim, vows, or anything else, but it was trying to tell you that there's another halacha that relates to these 3 holidays. That's Bal Ta'acher, which was in Perek Kaf Gimel, right? It appears later in the Torah. Again, order doesn't matter. Don't push it off. These 3 holidays, okay? You have 3 holidays. That's how he learns it, very simply. So some people agree with him that that's the context of these psukim. However, they're going to understand them differently. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Einot tzarich lomar b'Chag HaSukkot. He says, I'm not worried about the shalosh pamim b'shana and the Chag HaMatzot. I'm concerned, why does it say Chag HaSukkot? And then again, Chag HaMatzot, Chag Shavuot, and Chag HaSukkot. Chag HaSukkot is mentioned twice. So why is that? So he says, Lama ne'emal, lomar shezeh acharon. It's to tell you that that's the last one, okay? That no matter where you are in the calendar, right? You need 3, but Chag HaSukkot is the last one. Rabbi Meir, my time. Okay, we'll get back to, right, as opposed to, we're going to have the same idea with his son, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon, that it's the Chag HaSukkot. It's just he's going to take Chag HaSukkot to say it's not the Acharon, it's the only one, right? It's this, they're going to get it from the same idea, but different way of, right, different, same problem in the verse, which is the repetition of Chag HaSukkot, but a different conclusion. One says it's the last and one says it's the only one. Okay, but before we get to him, we're at Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, my time, Dichtiv. This is a different verse I didn't bring on your sheet. Ubata shama ve'vetem shama. This is a verse that talks about when you go to the temple to bring all the things that you committed to, your neder, right, which is exactly what we're talking about. It says when you go there, ve'vetem shama. It says you go there and you bring. So what does he say? When you go there, you have to bring it, okay? Basically, you've got one opportunity. The next time you get there, bring it, because it says, and you go there and you bring it. So you can't go empty-handed, basically. The Rabbanan, what do they do with this? Because that's a good proof, right? It sounds like you have to bring it. Well, ha'ula aseh. It's a mitzvah aseh. You should do it the first time, but you're not going to be obligated on Bal Ta'acher. It doesn't say anywhere in that verse anything referring to the negative, don't do this. So therefore, that's how they view it. The Rabbi Meir, what's he going to retort to the Rabbanan? It doesn't really say anything negative in that verse. In other words, if the Torah tells you bring it and you didn't bring it, then you immediately, in other words, we have a different pasuk that talks in the negative. That's Bal Ta'acher. This is just defining what's the framework of Bal Ta'acher. So once we have that, then this is a negative verse because it's really telling you, go there and bring it. And if not, then we go back to the other verse of Bal Ta'acher. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, my time, but what's his reason to say 2 regalim? Where does he get that from? So, dichtiv ela tasu l'Hashem b'moadechem. Okay, now we're in a totally different context. This is in the context of, I'm just going to stop the share screen. It's not so relevant anymore. But it says here that you're supposed to, this is the end of all the list in Parsha Pinchas of all the sacrifices. It's the ones we read every holiday in Maftir. These are the sacrifices you bring on Rosh Chodesh as well. And then it says, these are what you should do on your Mo'adechem, which is plural. That's what he's going to darshan in a second. And then it says, right, in addition to your Nidarim and your Nidavot and all the voluntary things. So they say, mi'ut mo'adim shnaim. Say, what's mo'adechem? This must be referring to when you can do, until when can you bring your korbanot? And it says mo'adechem, which sounds like 2. Every time you have plural, the minimum is 2. So I'm going to go with 2. That's what I think. The Rabbanan, what are they going to retort to this? They don't use that pasuk to teach about Baal Ta'achir. It's talking about something else entirely. It's for Rabbi Yonah. What Rabbi Yonah says, Rabbi Yonah, even though we just had this section, on this holiday you bring those, and on this holiday you bring those, and there's all different sacrifices for each. There's one thing that's a common thread with all of them. We've seen this before. We're going to see this much more later on in Shas, which comes up very often, which is this concept of the Shiur Zim Echad L'Chatan. And all the holidays, and Rosh Chodesh, you bring this Shiur Zim Echad L'Chatan, not just the regalim, all the holidays. A sin offering of a Shiur Zim. So now they say, what's this goat offering for? It's in all of them. The reason is for any type of impurity that happened in the temple, whether it relates to a person, whether it relates to sacrificial meat, and it was accidental. This atones. You do it a bunch of times a year, and it atones for any kind of issue. So B'mo'adechem comes to say there's something that's the same about all of them, that their Shiur Zim Echad L'Chatan is all for the same reason. Okay, so that's a totally aside. That was, why didn't they learn from their 2 holidays, right? All the other opinions. And now we're going to get to finally the last one. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimma, my taima. What's his reason to say it's only Chag HaSukkot, right? It doesn't matter where you are in the year. Chag HaSukkot is the one you have to bring it by then. So again, I told you this already. He holds like Rabbi Shimma, lo yamer Chag HaSukkot shebo diber HaKatuv. You didn't need Chag HaSukkot specifically at the end of that section because it already said Chag HaSukkot. You could have just added Chag HaMatzot and Chag Shavuot. So lama ne'amal, right? So shebo diber HaKatuv, lama ne'amal. So the Chag HaSukkot at the end was to tell you that's the determining one. Okay, so we've now seen the 5 different options. Is it 3 regalim whenever they come? Is it 3 regalim starting with Nisan? That was our Mishnah. Is it 1 regal? Is it 2 regalim? Or is it just Sukkot? Okay, 5 different opinions. So now we're going to go back and say a bunch of them related to this Chag HaMatzot, Chag HaShavuot, Chag HaSukkot. But Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov didn't, right? They proved it from Bebetim Shama and they proved it from Mo'adechem. They didn't use those verses. So what did they do with those verses? Hi, b'Chag HaMatzot, b'Chag Shavuot, b'Chag Sukkot, my darshan. What do they do with this? So, they need it for something Rabbi Elazar said in the name of Rabbi Yoshaya, Emoraim. Okay, it's not a Tanaitic source, even though it kind of sounds like it. How do you know? Now, we learned this also. Korban Chagiga is the korban you're supposed to bring on the holidays. Right now, you're supposed to bring it the first day of the holiday, but if you didn't, you have all the days of the holiday in which to do it. What about Shavuot when you only have 1 day? So you get 7 days, okay? The 7 days counting the first day of Shavuot, you have to basically bring the sacrifice. Where do we know this from? Talmud Lomar, b'Chag HaMatzot, b'Chag Shavuot, b'Chag Sukkot. Makish Chag HaShavuot, l'Chag HaMatzot. Now notice, they're really ignoring Chag Sukkot right now. Okay, and later the Gemara is going to say, well, what do you do with Chag Sukkot in that pasuk? But right now we're going to say, take Chag HaMatzot and take Chag Shavuot and compare them, just like Chag HaMatzot. Ma Chag HaMatzot yesh lo tashlumin kol shiva. You have 7 days. You have all the days of Pesach. Ah Chag HaShavuot yesh lo tashlumin kol shiva. What's the relevance of this nowadays? We don't say tachanun. If you ever know this, on the days following Shavuot in which you can do tashlumin. It's a very relevant halacha. Okay, so now they basically say, what do you see here? That's what the verse is there. It's to teach you some other halacha entirely. That's what they learn from this verse. So now they ask a few questions. Number 1, why do they compare to Chag HaMatzot and not to Chag HaSukkot? If you do Chag HaSukkot, you'll get 8 days because you can do tashlumin through the 8th day. So they say, Mala, right? Why don't you say to Chag HaSukkot, Mala lan shmona, avchan shmona, and then Shavuot, you get 7 days in addition to Chag HaShavuot, and you'd have 8 days altogether, like Sukkot. So the first answer, which we're going to reject, but they're going to say, Shmini Regal B'fnei Atzmo, who, we know this, right? Shmini Atzeret is its own holiday. We learned this in Masechet Sukkah, right? And then they say, wait, that's not true though. In other words, they want to say there's no tashlumin for Sukkot on Shmini Atzeret. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? It's only for these 6 things referenced in Pazar Kashav. I'll get to that in a second, what they are. I'll go do a quick review. But when it comes to tashlumin, everyone agrees that you can do tashlumin on the 8th day. Only for these 6 things is it different, but not for tashlumin. It says in the explicit Mishnah, if you didn't do the chagiga on the first day, you could do it all the days, including Shmini Atzeret, that extra day. So there you see, it could have been 8 days, Sukkot, to which the Gemara answers, tafasta meruba lo tafasta, tafasta mu'at tafasta. If you have a choice between something smaller or something larger, go for the smaller. So we have either 7 days of Pesach or 8 days of Sukkot, which includes Shmini Atzeret. Let's go with the 7 days of Pesach, right? This is a line people use in life in general, right? Don't try to take too much, right? You go for too much. You have something, go for it. Don't try to overdo it. Okay, and then the last question of the Gemara is going to be, what's the point then of Chag HaMatzot? If the whole verse, according to them, is to teach you this comparison between Chag HaMatzot and Chag HaShavuot, then you don't need Chag HaSukkot in the Pasuk. What's that? Therefore, that will wait for tomorrow. Just to go back for one quick minute of Pazar Kashav, let's just review what they are. Pei is pious. Remember, there was a lottery system for the 70 bulls, and there's 24 mishmarot, so every mishmar got to do 3 times other than 2, because 24 times 3 is 72. So 2 were left over. You would have thought they would get the pious then. They would be first in line for the par on Shmini Atzeret, but they're not, because it's got its own pious, and we start from the beginning. Zayin, Zman, Shechianu. You make a Shechianu, not like on the 7th day of Pesach. Resh, Regel. I'm going by one interpretation because there's a few things that there's a machloket about. I'll just give you the simple today. Resh is Regel, which means when you say the davening, you say Shmini Chag Atzeret, you don't call it Chag HaSukkot. Kuf is Korban, that the Parim had. We had the 13 and then 12 and then 11 bulls on Sukkot. This has its own count. It has its own unique Korban. It doesn't go by that count. Shiur, it has its own theme for the Shiur. Usually the Shiur, the one with the Korban, had to do with Matznot Aniyim on Sukkot. It doesn't have to do with that on Shmini Atzeret. It has its own Shiur. And Bet is Bracha, which Rashi explains is the Bracha. They would bless the king. There was a special Bracha they do for the king, as they did in the Chanukah Abayit and Sefer Melachim. It said, Bayom HaShmini shalach et ha'am v'yibrachu et hamelech. So they sent the nation, everyone blessed the king. There was a special blessing for the king. They did that on Shmini Atzeret. That comes from Sefer Melachim. And with here, we will end for today. So again, what we saw is we finished up this idea about the kings, and we really proved that there is a distinction, Jewish kings, non-Jewish kings. We had to just resolve this issue of Daryavish, and we said, well, this contradiction of the Psukim, right, basically comes down to the years he was good and the years he was bad. Was he really bad? We gave 4 options. 1 we rejected in the end. The first one wasn't exactly a proof. It was just proving he wasn't necessarily good in that verse, right, that made him look like he was good. It wasn't really good. And then the 2, which really bring proofs, he was either engaged in bestiality with the dog, or he gave us wood to build the temple so that he could ultimately destroy it. Then we got to the Regalim. After we resolved why is it not the 15th of Nisan, we just said, well, it's the month in which Nisan comes. And then we said the reason is it's all according to Rabbi Shema, who says Baal Ta'acher starts with Sukkot. And then basically we went through all the other opinions and what their proof text was and what each one does with the other. Okay, and that's where we ended. So we'll finish up with this topic of Baal Ta'acher. We'll continue it tomorrow. Have a great day, everyone.